everybody, what's going on? I'm Shane and I love games. And today, I want to talk about a little game that's been around for a while. This game has seen a few iterations, and I think that's the problem with it. And I think that most people would now equate it with a negative experience, and that's unfortunate. Because of its history and what it has done for the zeitgeist of gaming is uncomparable to any other game that's out there. Now you can look at gateway games like Carcassonne and Settlers of Catan, and those are definitely modern gateway games where people can sit down and play them and go, man, I actually kind of dig board games, and they really kicked off this modern board game environment that we're in now. But if you go back a few years, there's another game that's pretty predominant and has been for almost 100 years. That game is Monopoly. And I know what you're thinking, God, I hate Monopoly. And there's a reason you hate Monopoly, and it's not because of the game. The Monopoly Wiki says that there are 1,144 different variations and licensed versions of Monopoly in the market today. That's a lot. And I think we're in Monopoly overload. And I think it's ruined the game as a whole. And don't get me wrong, McDonald's Monopoly, before the big scandal a few years ago of it actually not paying out any prizes, allegedly, was still part of that Monopoly nuance. People absolutely loved the fact that they could play Monopoly at McDonald's. There's no problem with that. The problem is, there's Horseopoly. And for the 3 people that bought Horseopoly, that was enough for an entire company called USAopoly to do nothing but make variations of Monopoly for players. There's even a make-your-own Monopoly, essentially making an infinite number of Monopolies out there. Monopoly is and was the most important board game that has ever been. And I'm going to tell you why. Let's start with the game itself. The game itself was created in the Depression. It was kind of a way to be like, look how rich we are, look how the fat cats live, and it grew from there. You can find much more detailed histories of Monopoly out there. I'm not going to go too much into it, but suffice to say, Monopoly has lasted 100 years, and there's a really good reason for it. At the core of it, Monopoly is a social interaction game. On your first turn, if you don't pick up a few properties, you're pretty much hooped for the rest of the game. And the idea is that you are wheeling and dealing with other players. Imagine you are 12, and you're just really learning how to properly social interact with people. You have money, which is a big aspect of it as well, so there's a math component. But you're also trying to make the best deals you can with other players, at the same time making sure that you are growing your own empire. This is important. These are important skills to learn in a social setting. I spent a whole summer one year with my best friend playing against my sister and her best friend, and all we did that summer was play Monopoly over and over and over again, and no 2 games were ever the same. And I think that's a key component that's missing from people's ideas when they talk about Monopoly, is that you will never play the same game of Monopoly twice because of dice rolls. Because of that random element that's also part of the game, where you land during those first few turns is going to set you up for either victory or failure. And yes, there is going to be that player that overall will end up kind of dominating. And sometimes those games take 2 hours, 3 hours. And as silly as that sounds, sometimes you need to play a game for 2 or 3 hours, Talisman. But I think a lot of those really key factors about Monopoly have been completely forgotten about in the modern board game world. And I think we really need to go back to that base game of Monopoly. Now, that being said, I do not own a base game of Monopoly. I have 2 versions of Monopoly, one of which is this beauty right here. This is the G.I. Joe licensed Monopoly. I know, I was like, woo, licenses ruin Monopoly. And the only versions that I have are either the Star Wars Episode 1 Super Special Edition or this guy right here, which is the G.I. Joe themed Monopoly. That being said, I played this once in the 6 years that I've owned it, and it's been moved around from place to place. I actually have tape on it that's bad, but I didn't want to lose any of the pieces because the board itself is beautiful, the pieces are beautiful, and here's the one thing. This particular licensed version of Monopoly is beautiful, and people who love G.I. Joe, like I do, will appreciate this. Grandma who wants to play Monopoly will play Monopoly. It doesn't matter what the license is on it, but it still operates as a Monopoly game with a G.I. Joe skin on it. The problem is there's 1,144 of those games out there right now, and it's really flooded the market, and I think it's really detracted about how important a gateway game that Monopoly is to the board gaming community. And that's a shame. Because when you're young, Monopoly is great, and it's frustrating, and it tears families apart as a good game should. Because it teaches you several things. It teaches you how to interact, how to get over it, and really, conflict builds character. We really need to go back and visit it again. I think that Monopoly gets a bad rap for saturating the market with its own name. Let's go back to basics. Let's see not an electronic handheld debit version of Monopoly. Let's go back to Monopoly and fear the person who has Park Place and Boardwalk and hotels. Because that person is a dick. I hope you liked this commentary episode of Shane Loves Games. I really wanted to talk about how important I feel Monopoly is and how people out there hate Monopoly. If it says Monopoly on it, it may not even be Monopoly proper. It could be Monopoly Deal. Monopoly Deal is a great trick-taking game that happens to operate with some of the same principles as Monopoly, but people will not give it the time of day because it says Monopoly on it. A Monopoly Deal game can last 10 minutes max, and you can get through several of those little games really quickly, and it's so fun, and there's so many FU cards that you can throw out. Monopoly, as a whole, does not have an FU card, really. Monopoly Deal does, and it's like, no, you can't do this, and no, you can't do that, and it's fast, and it's easy, and you're done in 10 minutes, and it doesn't take 6 hours to play. But people aren't giving it the accolades that it deserves because it has Monopoly on it. And that's too bad. We need to get over it. Get over it, people. Monopoly is great. Just give it a chance. And remember, there's always a bigger fish.